In December 2024, the Australian government paid the world's biggest accounting and consulting firm to fix one of its most sensitive problems, an automated welfare system that was punishing the country's most vulnerable people. 7 months and around $290,000 later, the report arrived, 237 pages, and a large part of it had been written by AI. It cited academic papers that had never been written. It quoted a federal court judgment that no judge had ever delivered. It credited real professors with research that did not exist. Deloitte refunded 97,000 Australian dollars, the final installment, less than a quarter of the fee. It changed none of its recommendations. The government kept the report. That same week, Deloitte handed Anthropic's AI assistant to all 470,000 of its people. Most people read those two stories as a contradiction. They are the same story told twice. The report sat on a government website for weeks and nobody caught the invented court ruling. Not the department, not the firm. It was spotted by a welfare law researcher at the University of Sydney with no connection to the contract. If a government pays $300,000 for pages it never reads that closely, the pages were never the point. Here is what is actually for sale. When a company signs off its own accounts, that signature is worth nothing. What these firms sell is an outside name that goes on the document and carries the consequences. If the numbers are wrong, the auditor signed them. If the welfare system is challenged in court, there is an independent review saying it was fine, and the department holds it up and says, "We checked." The report is not the product. The report is the receipt. The product is the transfer of responsibility from a person who cannot afford to be wrong to an organization that agreed for a fee to be wrong on their behalf. This market formed as corporations expanded across borders in the 1970s. Money moved through subsidiaries under different laws, but no local accountant could answer for the whole system. Global business needed more than verification. One institution, present everywhere, capable of carrying the consequences. That is what the Big Eight became. By the end of the 1980s, their names appeared on roughly 98 of every 100 public company audits. Their advantage was not exclusive skill, but the weight behind each signature. Consolidation reduced 8 networks to 5 and finally 4, while meaningful new entrants almost vanished. The barrier is not prestige, it is money. When a company collapses, shareholders do not sue the accountant who did the field work. They sue the firm, because the firm has assets and indemnity insurance. KPMG paid £21 million over the collapse of the British outsourcer Carillion. A boutique with 30 brilliant people cannot survive that number, and a promise you cannot survive is not a product you can sell. The pattern appears elsewhere. 3 agencies control almost the entire ratings market, while McKinsey, BCG, and Bain dominate strategy. A board can defend painful decisions more easily when one of those names is on the cover. Then somebody tested how much blame the shield could hold. By the end of the 1990s, Enron was celebrated across America and valued in the tens of billions. Arthur Andersen certified its accounts. In 2000, Enron paid Andersen $25 million for auditing and $27 million more for consulting. Those numbers are usually presented as a conflict of interest. Read them as a price list. The audit was the smaller figure, and the audit carried the legal exposure. Andersen was underpricing the risky part to keep the relationship that paid for everything else. Meanwhile, Enron was hiding roughly $20 billion of debt off its books through a web of shell companies. Andersen did not die because it did bad work. It died because more blame arrived than it could absorb, and the moment the shield cracked, everything else turned out to be worthless. 89 years of history gone in 9 months. Strip a normal company of its reputation and you still have factories and patents. Strip this one and there is nothing underneath. The survivors did not learn a lesson about competition. They learned the shield was now scarcer. The 4 remaining networks now sign the accounts of 498 companies in America's largest 500. So what were the 300,000 employees for? The pipeline was enormous. About 57% of Harvard's 2022 class entered technology, finance, or consulting. But look at what those armies produced. Working papers, sample tests, review notes. Evidence that a procedure was followed on a date by a named person who was supervised. In a business built on carrying blame, that paper trail is the most valuable thing in the building. It is what you produce in court to prove failure was not negligence. Which explains a detail that otherwise makes no sense. An auditor relationship typically lasts about 23 years before a company switches providers. At the extreme, Canada's largest telecommunications group has retained one firm for 144 years. That is not laziness. A signature that has sat on your accounts for a century is a stronger defense than one that arrived last spring. Long tenure is the product appreciating. Now test it against the quality. In 2022, one major firm's inspections failed at 43%. Market-wide deficiencies hovered near 40, rose to 46 in 2023, then fell to 39, while the largest four dropped to roughly 20. Now hold that against behavior. When nearly half of inspected audits were failing, clients did not leave. When quality measurably improved, they did not come back because they had never gone. Quality does not move the money, it never did. One network even surrendered 84 audit relationships worth $215 million. Firms do not normally discard that much revenue because customers dislike the service. They do it when the risk becomes too expensive to insure. Consulting says the same thing. A 2016 deliverable advised a client to create a clear mission and form value-generating partnerships. The language sounds polished because almost nothing in it can be disproved. A 2024 survey found that barely 13 in every 100 businesses believed consultants created more benefit than damage, and they kept hiring them. So what actually kills this business? Not bad work. Spending the collateral. While helping Australia's Treasury design anti-avoidance rules in 2013, a PwC partner bound by 3 confidentiality agreements circulated secret policy details through the firm. At least 53 colleagues received them and used the advanced knowledge to position clients, including Google, before the rules arrived. The receipt is the cleanest number in the story. PwC sold its entire Australian government business for $1. 1,750 staff, $255 million of contracts. Same people, same skills, same clients, only the name removed. Value, $1. Rebuilt as Skyn Advisory, it now runs smaller than the day it launched. Then, in March 2026, it happened again. Same country, different firm. Whistleblower reports alleged KPMG staff used confidential client information to win new work. The chief executive, the chairman, and the chief operating officer all resigned. It faced a ban on federal contracts and prepared to cut around 1,000 jobs while reducing partner payouts by up to a fifth. Governments had already held the inquiry. It happened anyway because as long as the only real asset is a name that can be spent, somebody spends it. So what did AI actually do? It did not attack the product, it attacked the disguise. For a century, the signature came wrapped in visible human effort. In Australia, the wrapping came off. The machine produced the pages, the firm produced the name, and the deal completed exactly as designed. The department got a review it could stand behind and stood behind it. So 470,000 AI licenses are not hypocrisy, they are arithmetic. AI strips out the cost of manufacturing the evidence while leaving the product untouched. Combined revenue hit a record $219 billion while headcount fell. One firm's global staff dropped by 5,600. Another moved to cut 1/10 of its U.S. audit partners. For the first time, these firms advertise more AI roles than audit roles. The pyramid is being demolished. The roof is staying up. Except there is one problem, and it ends this. If a language model performed the procedure, who was negligent? Everything depends on the answer being the firm. And regulators have started writing the question down. The global body that sets auditing standards is drafting rules on liability and proof of error when machines carry out audit steps, with first drafts due by the end of this year. America's main purchasing agency has spent 2026 drafting a clause forcing contractors to declare every AI system used on a contract within 30 days, with liability caps and grounds for termination attached. Comments closed 3 days ago. And the corrected Australian report now names the AI toolchain that helped write it. Once a deliverable must state what produced it, the client is no longer buying an unqualified signature, and every lawyer alive will eventually ask whether a firm that outsourced the judgment really exercised it. So the question was never which competitor takes their place. Not boutiques, not in-house teams, not the ex-partner working alone. None of them can sell the product because none of them can afford to be blamed. The question is whether the product survives at all, or whether responsibility stops being something you can buy and becomes something licensed and regulated like a utility. For 100 years, these firms sold certainty to people who could not afford to be wrong. Now they are finding out you cannot outsource being wrong. You can only rent someone to stand in front of you, right up until everyone can see the machine standing behind them.